And welcome back to NYC Builds Bio monthly programming. We've got lots of exciting content to share with you this year, so I hope you'll continue to join us for future events. My name is Nancy Kelley, and I serve on the steering committee and as a founding member of NYC Builds Bio. I am joined by my fellow founding and steering committee member, Mitch Simpler, managing partner of JBB. I'm going to say hello, Mitch.
There. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our latest installment of New York City Builds Bio Plus. And if you were on the last one, you'll see that this is part of a series to really help enlighten all of our members and guests as to what's happening in the New York metropolitan area. And Nancy, thank you for letting me introduce myself. And with that, I turn it back to you and the incredible panel that you guys have today. So.
Great. I would like to thank Triumvirate Environmental for being the lead sponsor of this seminar series, which, as Mitch said, focuses on emerging life science subclusters in the greater New York metro area. I would also like to acknowledge the founding and corporate members of NYC Builds Bio who make this programming possible. We really appreciate all of our returning and new members this year. We're excited to welcome all of you to the third webinar of the sponsored seminar series. It will focus on Midtown East and Manhattanville subclusters in New York City. Our first webinar, held in January, discussed the impact of a recent New York City planning study of the greater New York Metro Life Science economy on all of the subclusters in the greater New York metro region. It concluded that the New York metro area, which includes New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, enjoys the largest life science economy in the United States, and 2020 census data shows it growing faster than many other regions of the country. The second webinar, held in February, focused on two of the fastest growing subclusters in New York City, Midtown West and Long Island City. You can find links to both of those sessions on the NYC Builds Bio website and on our YouTube channel. This seminar series runs for 8 episodes from January through August, each covering different life science subclusters in the greater New York metro area in more depth. All of these subclusters are growing up around existing academic institutions and new private life science development in neighborhoods, which each has its own distinct social, cultural, and recreational flavor. The next seminar is scheduled for April 26th, focused on Hudson Square and Jersey City, which is just across the Hudson River in New Jersey. Registration is open, so be sure to sign up after this event to learn more, and be sure to check out our website for other upcoming events. Before opening it up to our program today, let me just refresh your memory about the developing life science clusters in New York City and beyond. Just where is life science growth taking place in the greater New York marketplace? Next slide. Next slide. Just as happened in Cambridge, Mass, over the course of the development of its life science cluster, a number of subclusters are developing around academic hubs in Manhattan, flanked by 2 ground-up development opportunities in live, work, play environment for millions of square feet of commercial life science space in Long Island City and Jersey City. The East Side corridor consists of Mount Sinai, next slide, Mount Sinai, Academic Alley, Long Island City, Midtown East, Brooklyn, Long Island, and Hudson Square, which is the nexus between the east and west sides of Manhattan. The West Side corridor stretches, next slide, from the Bronx Hutchinson Metro Center down to Columbia Presbyterian in the north, through Manhattanville, Midtown West, Hudson Square, and on to Jersey City. Today, we'll learn about the subcluster of Midtown East, which includes a number of foundational life science projects, such as the Alexandria Center for Life Sciences, New York City's first commercial life science campus, and the adjoining NYU Langone Science Center, a new 365,000 square foot facility with 10 floors of laboratory space dedicated to research. Today, we'll focus on two of the most recent and exciting projects in Midtown East, the Cure at 345 Park Avenue South, developed by Deerfield Management, and IndieBIO New York, developed by SOSV at 7 Penn Plaza. To discuss these exciting opportunities, we have Karen Heidelberger, Chief Partnership and Communications Officer at Deerfield Management, Mark Veich, President of Advancium Health Network and the Executive Director of the Deerfield Partnership Foundation, Stephen Chambers, New York Partner and Managing Director of SOSV, and Eva Shih, Managing Director of T3 Advisors. Then we will learn more about the growing subcluster in Manhattanville. Scott Metzner, principal of Janus Property Company, will introduce the Manhattanville-Ep.3 district, New York City's newest commercial life science campus that is transforming a neighborhood in Harlem. Cia, co-founder Harlem Biospace, will talk about the incubator located in the Manhattanville-Ep.3 district that has hosted over 70 life science companies to date. Oren Herskowitz, Senior Vice President, Intellectual Property and Tech Transfer at Columbia and Executive Director of Columbia Technology Ventures, will introduce Columbia's newest campus, and Joshua Brumberg, Dean of Sciences of the Graduate School of CUNY and Acting Executive Director, CUNY Advanced Research Center, will talk about CUNY's latest scientific facilities, which will help to support life science companies in the rest of the neighborhood. Before I turn it over to Triumvirate for introduction, I just want to cover a few administrative details. We have over 225 people registered today, so please keep your cameras and microphones off during the program to minimize technical difficulties. There is a program and PowerPoint highlighting the hosts, sponsors, speakers, and content for the meeting. These will be posted on the NYC BuildsBIO website. The program is being recorded and will also be available on the NYC BuildsBIO YouTube channel. Since most of you are participating in listen-only mode, please feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We will open up for discussion and Q&A at the end of the program and will address as many audience questions as possible. If we have time at the end of the meeting, we will also have a chance for smaller randomized groups to meet in separate rooms where you can open your videos and microphones to talk to each other. You can stay as long as you like to get to know each other and share stories. Now I would like to introduce Alicia Aniello, General Manager, New York Branch, Triumvirate Environmental, the lead sponsor for this seminar series.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alicia Aniello, and I am the General Manager of Triumvirate's New York, New Jersey operation. Nancy's been doing such a wonderful job of getting these meetings on the books and doing a wonderful job of compiling all the data and putting those slides together. So thanks again. A little bit on Triumvirate, and then we can move on to the fun part of the presentations. Triumvirate has been the leading environmental health and safety service provider to the life science community going on 34 years now. From laboratory moves to regulatory setup, permitting and on-site support, including waste disposal, we've partnered with hundreds of life science companies across the country and helped them grow safely from their early stages in incubator spaces through to production and manufacturing spaces. It's been a real treat to witness some of their novel ideas come to life over my 15+ years with the organization. Our success comes from our flexibility and customization of our offerings to fill all EH&S needs through one vendor, thus leaving the researchers and the management companies free to remain hyper-focused on their science and the success of their business. At the request of some of our longest clients from Cambridge, we set up locations in California 4 years ago, so we can continue to service our bi-coastal clients at a national level. With the excitement and growth here in our New York metro area, I thought Triumvirate could host this series and place a spotlight on the area with our long list of life science clientele across the country as our audience. As Nancy discussed, the potential for collaboration with our research hospitals and universities, along with growing amount of space and funding being dedicated to life science here in the New York metro, really makes our locale ripe with possibility. At the local level, Triumvirate has had a full operation in New York City since 2003, including the only commercially permitted hazardous waste storage facility in the 5 boroughs. Say that 5 times fast. We are the only local resource in this market, and having the facility puts us in the same seat as all of our clients under the full scrutiny of New York City DEP, FDNY, and New York State DEC. We've been providing EHS support and consulting, waste disposal support, and emergency response services to some of the largest research institutions in New York City for over 20 years. We now have over 40 consultants local to the New York metro area and a fleet of just over 50 vehicles. I'm looking forward to hearing the speakers today. One of the buildings presenting, we're scheduled to move in their first tenants in just 2 weeks. Another one of the buildings being discussed today will be moving in their first tenants in a longer time frame than that. Not yet decided, but good luck to all the new operators and all the tenants moving here in the spring. And again, big thank you to Nancy and New York City IndieBIO for providing us with this platform. And that's it. I'll leave it to the speakers now.
Great, thank you so much, Alicia. Carolina, next slide, please. So now I'd like to introduce Karen Heidelberger and Mark Veich.
Thank you very much. I'm going to kick us off and talk just a little bit about the cure. So, Nancy, I really liked how you talked about the live, work, play community. We are planning something very similar, but we think about it as live, work, play, and learn. Which is the Cure on 345 Park Avenue South. And we're working on creating a healthcare ecosystem that's really all about collaboration to help further innovation. The Cure, although we're talking about life sciences, really is inclusive of the entire healthcare ecosystem, as healthcare is converging across all of the different sectors of healthcare. We think it's really important that they're all in one space. Next slide, please. So our goal around the Cure is to help surround the leaders with expertise, space, and networks so that they can get smarter and learn faster so that they can succeed faster. And this is true to Deerfield's mission, which is to advance healthcare and get cures to patients, hence the name, the Cure. And if you notice the period, it's cure, period. So we're going to stop the diseases here. Next slide, please. To do this, we believe it takes a very holistic approach so that we can have all of the pieces together and we take a synergistic view of how they all fit together. And the goal is to be able to take a nascent idea as well as a long-standing company so that they can all benefit from the same exact ecosystem. Next slide, please. So what we've done is we've taken an approach where all of the leaders will be surrounded by programming, which leads to education and networking, and world-class space where they can learn in those spaces, but also execute so that their companies can reach their full fruition. Next slide, please. So if you can imagine Deerfield being in this building, Deerfield has a number of different expertises that we're able to offer to all of the different constituents within the building. So some of the program will be driven by Deerfield, some of it by the Cure. The Cure is building out its entire own programming team so that they will be responsible for part of the education. But the residents in the building are also going to have expertise, and they'll also have specific desires to make sure that their needs are being fulfilled as well. So they'll be responsible for some of the education going on. And then we've had a number of different partners that want to be involved in this as well. So when you really think about the entire community coming together, we will have space in the building so that we're able to deliver lots of different types of programming to all of the residents within the building. So it really has to be a true marriage between the programming as well as the space to make sure that we can in fact deliver all of this. Next slide, please. One of the spaces that we have is the collaboration residency. And this space in particular is very important. Although it's not wet lab space, it is a space where small companies are able to come in and take as little space as they need, or large companies are able to come in and take an office. If you can imagine the number of large companies that have approached us for space in the building, they would in fact overwhelm the ecosystem. And the goal here, as you can see from what I've talked about already, is to have multiple companies within this space, and a large company would just take over too much. So the collaboration residency is purposefully built the way it is so that small companies can learn from the big companies about how to create a footprint, and the large companies can remember how to innovate from the small companies. So the collaboration residency has about 45 offices as well as workstations in it where they can all work and learn together. Next slide, please. We also have the Cure Lounge, which is in the rooftop terrace area, where we're planning on creating a membership, executive membership lounge, where we will have curated networking, and so that the leaders will have access to mentors and ideas, and also different educational programs. The space is truly beautiful and has views of the Empire State Building at night, so it's a really special spot. Next slide, please. The conference center truly is the heart of the building. And this is where lots of the serendipitous conversations, but also the heartfelt programming will take place. We have 5 classrooms where the walls all roll back, so you can actually have one large conference space. And again, the conference space is actually big enough for 450 people to congregate. So although not necessarily something that was happening during COVID, will be very exciting as people are interested in getting back together. And it's important to note that this building, because it is lab ready, every floor has air changes that are appropriate for the lab. So we're really excited that this building is beyond COVID standards, just happens to be that way, and we're lucky to benefit from that. Next slide, please. And Mark is going to talk more about this. But this is a lab building. This is a life science ecosystem. So we do have Cure Innovation Labs in it, which is an incubator that will be large enough to host between 15 and 20 companies, depending on how big the companies are. But there are some major benefits in this. It's being run as a not-for-profit, and it will be close enough to the different expertise in the building. So as Mark will talk about, we really think that this is able to provide some great synergies for the companies that will be in the space. Next slide, please. Mark, do you want to stop and just speak there?
Yeah, I was just gonna elaborate a little bit.
Sure.
Just to stay on point. So Deerfield, well, as most of you know, the New York EDC invested $1 billion in the life science infrastructure in the city. And as Karen's talking about, the Cure is a result of that. But to further commit Deerfield's commitment to creating this healthcare ecosystem, it formed and launched an independent a public charity, as Karen mentioned. It's called Advancium Health. And within Advancium Health, one of the entities underneath it is this Cure Innovation Labs. So our aim here is really, this is not a project by Deerfield, but rather Advancium. Its focus is kind of post-seed, pre-Series A companies. It's not designed to be one bench that would be rented to a company, but rather we are targeting resident companies, or hoping for resident companies that have some funding, will likely need 4 or more benches that will be bundled with office space, workstation space. But being part of the healthcare ecosystem that is the Cure, we feel like the resident companies are going to succeed faster and also be in close proximity to many experts in the life science and drug discovery space. The model that we use, we have what we call founding partners. As an example, SVB Bank, which specializes in life science companies, will be part of the Cure Innovation Labs, one of our founding members. But their expertise, along with others that we will have in the future, will be there to work with the resident companies on any number of topics, financing. We eventually will have a law firm that specializes in IP, technology companies. So again, all aimed Cure Innovation Labs at creating really its own ecosystem on the 4th floor within the Cure to help these companies be successful. So this is a brand new project. Construction is going to be underway shortly, but we expect these labs to be open in the 2nd quarter of 2023. That's all, Karen.
Okay, so next slide now. We also have a MedTech incubator in the building. This is actually going to be run by Dr. Howard Levin, who comes out of Columbia. Dr. Levin is truly incredible. Not only is he a serial entrepreneur, but he has a huge interest in furthering diversity and is just a great mentor to all different constituents. So we're super excited to have this medical technologies incubator in the building. They will be, in fact, moving in relatively soon. And they, in fact, are also working with Advancium, which Mark is working on as well. With part of Advancium is called CobiCure, and they will be focused on medtech, pediatric medtech devices, where these children wouldn't be able to survive without the work that they're going to be doing. So we're really excited by that. Next slide, please. So we've gotten some really positive feedback on what it is that we're building here. If any of you think that there are other things we should be thinking about, we would, of course, love to hear about it. This is obviously a work in progress. It's near and dear to Deerfield's heart, but the Cure needs to be built for New York City's benefit. So if there are other things that you think we should consider, as I said, please hit me in the chat. Let me know. We're excited to hear your thoughts, but we can move on to the next slide now. I just wanted to highlight that, again, this goes back to really the convergence of healthcare and what we see happening. And the fact that this is located in the technology quarter of New York is incredibly important. Between drug delivery and care delivery and just value-based care in general, tech is so important to healthcare. So we're really excited by the location. Next slide, please. And you can see it's a 10-minute walk to major transportation. Next slide. But it also goes to the live, work, play, and learn concept. Lots of fun restaurants in this area. So we're super excited by that. And I think with that, I am done, Nancy.
Well, thank you so much, Karen and Mark. I mean, this is just an incredible resource for New York. And we were fortunate enough to have an event at the Cure when it was just opening in the fall in October. And it was really exciting to see that space, even though not everything was available at that time. So we're hoping that we'll be able to partner with you again to show our community exactly what it looks like now that it's further along.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, next slide, Carolina.
Whoops, keep going.
Okay, there you go. So now I would like to introduce Stephen Chambers of IndieBIO and SOSV. This is one of the most exciting organizations, I think, in the new company community globally today. They are working on problems that can literally save the planet. And if we are going to beat climate change, they'll probably be one of the reasons. So I'm very excited to hear about what they're working on. So Stephen.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for those kind words as well. Big thanks for inviting me to come along and talk to everybody here. I hope, Nancy's kind words you'll see the excitement that we are kind of excited about the companies that we have coming out of New York. So let's go to the next slide. Can you move on to the next slide? Oh, apologies for my typo there. So this is the building that we're moving into. We should be in there towards the end of the year. So it's 7 Penn Plaza next to the garden. We're on the 9th floor. and we're hugely excited to be moving into there. Like, got great views of 7th Avenue and of the garden. It's going to be a lab office space, okay? And that says a lot about what IndieBIO does. Can we move on to the next slide? So if you don't know about IndieBIO, it's probably not that surprising. Like, we're part of SOSV, which is originally it started out as Sean O'Sullivan's Ventures, a family office, but it's grown into this huge behemoth now. And so we've started over 1,000 companies, over $1 billion in management, somewhere around there. And the kind of business model that we have is we have a number of verticals that we work within. IndieBIO is the life science vertical that we work in. It started about 5 or 6 years ago in San Francisco, hugely successful in San Francisco. A number of kind of huge companies came out of San Francisco and the program that they ran there. You know, it was so successful that New York State came calling and said, okay, it would be great if we had kind of an IndieBIO in New York. And this is all part of the kind of like the state's effort to grow the ecosystem across New York that was mentioned by Mark in the previous presentation. And the way to think of IndieBIO is very much like we provide that first check. So we go in at early stage. So we are pre-seed, okay? So we go in very, very early with these companies. These companies are far from perfect when we see them, but we think there's something in there that is kind of that we can work with, that it touches something within us. And as Nancy said, like, we work across human and planetary health. So we're not just health tech. Like, we have like this kind of like planetary health component that I'll talk about more as I discuss the companies. Let's keep on moving to the next slide. And the kind of business model that we have, as I said, like, we go in very, very early. We take our deal flow comes from around the globe. It's very, very diverse. It's probably one of the things that I was truly shocked at was the diversity of deal flow that we see. Like, it includes everything from therapeutics, diagnostic, med tech, plant kind of proteins, a lot of fermentation, a lot of synthetic biology in there as well. Goes all the way through to ag tech and plant tech. So there's like a lot of diversity in there. And what we do is we take them into our program, which is 4 months long, and we work very, very closely with them, not just on the business model, but a lot of it's around the technical hurdles as well. And we get them in shape, like we do a lot of business hygiene on them. But the goal is to increase the value of the company coming out of the program, where they're ready for a seed investment. As I said, a lot of the companies are pretty raw when we see them, and we get them to a level where they're much more investable, much more more kind of ready to take off and really go fast, especially on the funding side of things. Like, we do have other accelerators, which I've kind of like brushed over, but probably what's kind of interesting in the kind of context of this talk is we also have an accelerator in New Jersey. This is HACS. So this is a hard tech. So they can tend to focus on hardware, but we work very, very closely with HACS in developing some of our companies. So though we have like these strict verticals that we work in, there's a lot of crosstalk between the various companies, which is very successful, especially for the medical device side of things as well. Let's move on to the next slide. And I want to kind of like, you know, one of the things that we're finding is most exciting about what's happening now. And for this audience, I really wanted to get this in front of you and say, we're seeing a huge change. And part of this is driven by the new bioeconomy. Okay, we're seeing like the 20th century, a lot of it was based on basically the oil economy and organic chemistry and chemistry that came out of the 20th century. And that's how we got a lot of our fuels, food, and drugs. But what's happening in the 21st century is there's been a shift. And this disruptive kind of shift that's going on is the growth of the bioeconomy. A lot of this has been driven by advances in biology that we are now using to generate fuels, food, and drug. So going forward, we think this engineering biology, as we call it, is how we're going to feed ourselves. It's how we're going to fuel ourselves, and it's probably how we're going to heal ourselves going forward. Let's move on to the next slide. And so we invest across this sphere that we're seeing. And as I said before, it isn't just health tech. A lot of it's on the kind of neurotech, kind of the consumer side of things. Let's move on to the next slide. I just want to sort of highlight some companies. Like these are some companies that have come through our program. These are all New York companies. TomTech is developing a biomaterial that's made from chitosan, which has its origins in shellfish waste. So they're making this beautiful leather from basically animal waste. Okay. Foods also will work a lot of alternative foods. This is Bosque Foods. It's making a chicken cutlet out of mushrooms. Okay. Gene therapy. We work with a lot of technologies around CRISPR and kind of cell therapy and gene therapy. And this is just one of the companies. And then we're also seeing a lot of digital therapeutic companies. So again, what I'm trying to highlight here is that the old model that we have, like it's still functioning, there's still small molecules out there, but we're definitely seeing a shift both in the therapeutic side of things, but also in foods and in biomaterials. And I would say foods and biomaterials and therapeutics are probably the hot spot that we're seeing within kind of New York. Let's move on to the next slide. And the other thing that's happening is companies from our portfolio are also coming to New York. So this is Notco. This came out of the San Francisco portfolio. Just over 5 years, it started out in Chile. It's already gained kind of unicorn status. That means it's got over $1 billion in valuation just last year. So again, what I'm trying to highlight there is that these companies, they grow very, very quickly. And they're relocating to New York. And you know, it's a huge opportunity, both for Notco, but also for New York to take advantage of this. And then lastly, I just want to end with the next slide. So this is Opentrons, again, another IndieBIO company. And this is the first unicorn in Queens. I don't know if you know about Opentrons, but again, they've been hugely successful. And I think it's probably just over 4 years, I think they've been going. Started off as a startup company within, I think it was within Hacks, grew very, very quickly, had a very successful year with, you know, COVID, doing a lot of the, providing a lot of the automation for the PCR tests that we were all kind of like doing last year. So that's like the types of companies that we're seeing that are coming out of IndieBIO. Let's move to, and I think that's all my slides. And again, I want to leave you with this idea that we are graduating 20 early stage companies a year out of IndieBIO New York. They're going to need lab space. They're going to need somewhere to go on to. As I said, we work within a very programmable kind of way. We only work with these companies, kind of hard work with them, doing a lot of the heavy lifting with them for 4 to 6 months. We encourage them to move on, to go to other spaces. And they are all eagerly looking for lab space as they exit the program. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. It's a real unusual addition to the New York ecosystem. And I think it's going to be, as I said, a main driver. We've got one question here. Curious on where data comes into play, since data is the new oil, as I've been hearing.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. A lot of our companies, they have a kind of a data component in their business model. So we work with a lot of microbiome companies, like one that's in New York, in our New York ecosystem, Sequential Skin. They're in JLab, so they graduated from our second cohort. They moved on to JLabs as they exited the program, very successfully raising money as well. And again, like they have a data component. What they do is they analyze people's skin microbiome. They have a patch that gets delivered to you. You take a swab of your face, you send it off to them, and then they will do a microbiome analysis of the microbes that you have on your face. This is all kind of like genetic information that they have. And then they will identify products, either their products or products you can get from vendors that will be appropriate for the kind of for combating the microbiomes that you have on your face. But part of their business model is collecting the data. So as you send us the patch of bacteria to them, they collect this, and they're collecting all this data around the microbiome, which is a global data because they've got customers all over the world. And what they're finding is that different parts of the world have different microbiome on the face, as you probably expect, but also different kind of ethnic groups have different microbiomes on their face, and different times of the year, the microbiome on your face will change as well. And so they're collecting a huge amount of data that they think is going to be valuable going forward.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating, fascinating. And as I said to the Cure, we'll be very interested to share your space with our community so they can see what's going on there. Eva, I would love to call you up and just have you talk a little bit about, you had quite a long journey in helping IndieBIO to find their space. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because, you know, we have a lot of real estate people in our community, and they're wondering about the startups and where they want to go and how they find the space that they ultimately live in. So maybe you could shed some light on that.
Of course. Hi, Nancy. Thanks for having me. And it's an honor to just share this space with everyone here participating here. Well, the journey to work with SOS and IndieBIO here in New York City started around 2019. We had already previously worked with them with the San Francisco IndieBIO program. So with the infusion with the EDC's grant funds, we were trying to figure out, you know, what would make sense here in Manhattan specifically. Their driver was to, you know, figure out a commuter-friendly centralized area. So that really meant to be in the heart of Midtown, where Grand Central, Penn Station would connect a lot of the out-of-borough visitors, talents to convene here in Midtown. Early on, 2019, honestly, New York City did not have such a vibrant life science ecosystem in terms of the real estate infrastructure. You had the landlords that's such as Alexandria, you had up in Manhattanville, and as well as some of the early players that were setting up their incubator spaces, such as the New York Genome Center, J Labs. However, with IndieBIO's business model, and as well as just the accelerator program itself, we had to figure out you know, a building or infrastructure that can accommodate kind of a not fully lab build out, right? They were looking at about a 25% lab program, so in which 25% of the entire space would be dedicated to this wet lab to support the accelerator program, within the 75% or so of the rest of the space to support office or just event space. So with that, it did not exactly make sense to go to a fully robust lab building. We were looking at a couple buildings that had landlords that were very open to this use, right? It's a very nascent use here in New York City, especially when at that time, 2019, going into 2020, you had a very bullish and high use on just the typical traditional office users, such as the TAMIs, the finance, the professional services. But with the onset of the pandemic, what we saw was a lot of these users were then going remote or hybrid. So an industry such as life science turned to be a very appealing, attractive tenancy and innovative use for landlords that were once not exactly open to this. So I'd say 2021, we identified a landlord here in the heart of Midtown, specifically near the Penn Station area, the File Organization. They've been long-term landlords here. They invest, develop, and manage their buildings. And I think a key to kind of putting that partnership together was they welcomed this idea of a life science accelerator program to be run in their building. So I think just having that landlord to understand and really welcome and support this use was a big indicator to creating a successful partnership and location for IndieBIO and SOS.
Great. Well, I certainly can understand the challenge that you went through. My team and I in 2010 were looking to site the New York Genome Center at a time when no landlord anywhere was thinking about life sciences, in terms of for being in their building. And so it was a very long and involved process, and we ultimately were successful, as were you. And so congratulations on bringing them to 7 Penn Plaza and getting them up and running there.
I definitely say it's a collaborative effort. We had, SGA for the architects, JBB for the engineers on board. And currently we have Macro, who is PMing the project to get them in by the end of this year. So everyone's all rallying for the opening and just the continuing success of IndieBIO.
Yeah, it really does take a team, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. So thank you both. That was fascinating. And now we're going to turn to a new subcluster, the Manhattanville subcluster, where the Manhattanville Factory District is the newest commercial life science hub in the city. So Scott, tell us about that.
Thanks, Nancy, for inviting me to this and for everything you do for our entire community. You asked me to give a little bit of the flavor and history of our very special and charming neighborhood, which we generally, of course, skip over on these panels as we jump into what's been and what is being created here. Those of you who don't know the neighborhoods just north of Central Park, it's most simply thought of as 3 separate neighborhoods moving from east at the East River to the west at the Hudson River. And the East Side neighborhood, El Barrio, is of course known for its proud immigrant history and architecturally for its tenement housing. The Central neighborhood is predominantly known for its streets lined with extraordinary brownstone and limestone buildings, broad avenues, and its iconic Black history, including the Harlem Renaissance. The West Side, where we are, after being known for its large country estates in several villages that were just to the north of the then New York City border, including being the home of a famous resort hotel where Grant's tomb is currently located, became industrialized from where 125th currently is up to about West 135th Street. And just adjacent to the north of us, these beautiful residential historic districts grew after the country estates there were sold into smaller parcels. And you can think of Alexander Hamilton's Harlem home that was sung about in the show Hamilton, which still stands today. So the factory district at the southern end of this area, in what was then the village of Manhattanville, started at the West 125th Street corridor, going north, and was home to a significant number of industrial and factory buildings, paint factory, milk bottling plants, automobile factories, breweries in our neighborhood, bakeries, which is where the Tasty Lab building is, and probably most famously is the birthplace of the Manhattan Project. And it's in this historic village that Columbia University has been expanding its campus for about the last 10 years or so, from the Hudson River to the east side of Broadway, and where we at Janus have been assembling and developing the Manhattanville Factory District from around Amsterdam Avenue going east, where we've been restoring and repurposing these beautiful industrial buildings and adding new Class A construction, both to those buildings and from the ground up. So today, the Manhattanville Factory District is likely, we think, the greatest concentration of academic excellence and research in New York City, and boasts not only Columbia and the Jerome Green Research Building, which is one of the new the City University of New York, and we'll hear more from them later, as well as Columbia, the New York Structural Biology Center, Harlem Biospace that was mentioned earlier, the Pandemic Response Lab, and numerous other life science for-profit, not-for-profit companies in our buildings, ranging from 1 to 2 people, startups to Series A and B companies to publicly traded companies. We missed that first slide on the map. Maybe we just pull that up quickly, if somebody's got that.
Do you see that? This is the map.
Now I see it. Yeah, so for what I was describing, sort of the east side is down at the bottom and to the right, and coming up and to the left is going west. And you can see the historic Columbia campus that's south of 125th Street, and the expansion over by Broadway and west of Columbia City College on the top right. And then the factory district that we're developing is in that circle with a couple of the projects that we've completed to date. Maybe we can go to the second slide. So our multi-phase development, which fronts directly on West 125th Street, but is also nestled into this very unique and intimate neighborhood where 126th and 127th Streets actually join together. As I said, adjacent to both Columbia and College, is right now a 1.2 million square foot master plan campus. It's ungated, it's knit into the existing city fabric, and we've based it around a series of publicly accessible landscape passageways and parks where you can walk directly from 125th Street through to 126th, 127th, through our campus up to 128th Street, and literally right up the street to City College or back over to the ABCD trains. If we go to slide 3. Next slide. So this is a rendering of what? One back.
Can you move back, Carolina?
Yeah, this is a shot from 125th Street, looking north through this landscaped area. That's the Tasty building on the right in the foreground. And then through there is the Malt House with the original remnants of a brewery on the bottom 4 or 5 floors and new construction above. And now we can go to the next slide. And this we were recently featured in Architectural Digest. And this is another part on the north side of the Malt House and adjacent to the Mink building, another part of the master planned landscaping. We can go to the next slide. And this is a photograph of some of the landscaping in that area and how it connects at different levels to retail space and with the building lobby to the right. And you know, one of the features, I think, unique features of our campus is this, you know, activation of streets and the connection to the community and the vibrancy of the neighborhood. So we've now completed 6 buildings totaling approximately 800,000 square feet that include multifamily rental, commercial, arts and culture, retail, and of course, most notably, life science uses. Can we go to the next slide? We have specifically targeted the life sciences in our base building work, and whether that's in Harlem Biospace Incubator at the Suites building, which we mentioned, or about 80% and 80% of the Mink building's current occupancy. And this is a photograph, a recent photograph at the 100% purpose-built LEED certified Tasty Lab building, where we actually cut the ribbon there with our partner JP Morgan Asset Management and the governor just a few weeks ago. Just to the left, you can see under construction, there's a hotel and luxury rental building currently under construction. And we have additional development sites that we own in this district that can accommodate another approximately 400,000 square feet of development. And as I mentioned, you know, one of the things we're very proud of, we have really especially convenient transportation access, ranging from the bikeway at the Hudson River to the A, B, C, D trains in one direction and the one train in the other direction. The express trains access Columbus Circle in 1 stop, 42nd Street in 2, and Penn Station in 3 stops. The West Side Highway is just a couple blocks away. The 2A Amsterdam Avenue we're right on, which is the truck route into and out of Manhattan with easy access to I-95. And there is an express bus stop and lane to Metro North at Park Avenue, literally across the street from the site. We can accommodate users at every price point in the various buildings and with any level of desired amenities. We allow leases to be broken in order for tenants to grow within the district. We've attracted tenants from JLab, Alexandria, SUNY Downstate, and we've hosted dozens of new startups. We're involved in many exciting conversations right now to continue to expand occupancy. We're very, very proud to be a leader in this industry, in this community. And again, are always happy to, to talk and show off what we've got, for anyone who wants to contact us either through you, Nancy, or directly. And again, we appreciate everything you do for us.
Thanks, Scott. And I was actually at the ribbon cutting a couple of weeks ago, and it was so impressive to see these three buildings, the Malt House, the Mink, and Tasty, coming together so beautifully, right across from the Jerome L. Green Science Center. And I also just love how you've married the old and the new, the history of the neighborhood. The Malt House was a brewery, now it's life sciences. Mink building, what was in the Mink building?
So the Mink building was also part of this brewery complex that grew from the mid 1800s right up until Prohibition. But that was one of the last buildings. It was actually three buildings, but the one that everyone sees on Amsterdam Avenue was one of the last buildings built, and it was really built right into Prohibition. So it didn't live very long as a brewery building, and very quickly during Prohibition was turned into a first storage warehouse and remained that way until that industry died and it became vacated and we took it over.
Yeah, there's some amazing pictures for anybody who wants to go up for a visit to the Manhattan Factory District of these buildings when they were, before Scott started renovating them. And they're just fascinating to look at, the condition of the building and what you see now and how it's been transformed. Just incredible. So we've got a comment here. I can see the open space as a mini Kendall Square where researchers can have a gathering place for spontaneous meet and greet, for potential networking, for those at CCNY and Zuckerman Brain and Mind, in addition to the incubator building, hopefully more of a destination and not as a pass-through.
And so that's definitely what we have in mind, but we also want to connect a lot of the not-for-profits who are tenants and will increasingly be tenants as well. We currently have Hypothekids and BioBus, and not only connecting with each other in these publicly accessible open spaces, but if you look at this photograph of the Tasty building, we have a lot of private outdoor space as well. And at Tasty, half of the floors have privately accessible outdoor space.
Terrific, absolutely terrific. Oh, here's one from Alicia. Don't forget about the food scene in Harlem, the Harlem Eat Up in summertime, and the stamp that Marcus Samuelson has put on the neighborhood.
So many just absolutely delicious restaurants in Harlem. I lived in East Harlem for a little while, just a few blocks from Rayo's. Of course, that's on the other side, but just Harlem's been absolutely delicious, and it gets better and better every year.
No question about it. And not only on the west side, in addition to Marcus Samuelson, places like ROKC, Gin Ramen, Maison Harlem, Pastici, just some fantastic places. Our own tenant Plowshares with their coffee roasting and cafe. And we're also in conversations with some additional really, really interesting food and beverage hospitality operations.
Great. So thank you so much, Scott, for giving us that overview. And now we're going to drill down a little bit into one of your tenants and introduce Ciamcia, who is the co-founder of Harlem Biospace.
Great, thanks, Nancy, and great to see everyone here. There's probably just 3 points I want to make. I only have a few slides, but maybe we'll go to the next one here. And great to see a lot of love of Harlem already from the audience. But But Nancy mentioned this is one of the newest biotech districts. But the first point I want to make is actually we're actually really within walking distance to some of the most heavily made investments in tech and biotech innovation at Columbia and also like CUNY anywhere in New York City. And so there's a huge amount of activity. Oren Herskowitz is, I think, following up here to tell you about that. And really this area here in the factory district is within the 5 or 10 minute walking distance to not only great life science research at both the Morningside and the new Manhattanville campus, but also tech. And again, we've heard from other members that there's a sort of merging area here between tech and biotech. And really, it's a great area where we can benefit from those collaborations. Now at Harlem Biospace, we started about almost 10 years ago now. And we've hosted a number of companies that have spun out. And maybe we can just advance actually to the next slides here. But we're also super affordable. So even though we're in this great area with these great institutions around us, we're only charging about $1,000 a month still. And so we have 5 subway lines that's actually accessible to us. And a lot of our companies are not only from Columbia, is actually from various parts of New York City. And these are some of the ones that are listed. And they have also gone on to some other spaces around the city as well, since they have grown. We are probably going to be growing as well with the step out space in the Mink building. And so there'll probably be an announcement on that to host step out companies, for example, those from IndieBIO. We would love to host you here close to the Columbia campus at a very affordable rate, and the great food around as well. And so maybe the next slide. Here are the current companies, not just the alumni, but these are current companies really embodying the flavor of New York City life sciences that we have heard about already. And again, there's already a lot of activity actually in this area. Scott didn't mention this, but one of the companies right here in this area, Volastra, they just signed a $1.1 billion deal with Bristol Myers recently. I think that's public. So a lot of great academic activity and company activity at different levels as well. Next slide. And the third point, I want to make, huge activity going on. We're super affordable and accessible to everybody. Is also the community in Harlem. Scott was touching on that. And workforce development, building a diverse tech and biotech pipeline. We were in this position that's pretty unique, where we have all this exciting activity in Harlem. And so we don't have to shy away from that. We really want to embrace it. And there's a program we're working with, a sister initiative nonprofit called Hypothekids, where they have engaged thousands of students across all 5 boroughs, but especially in Upper Manhattan, both with K-12 as well as into college programs, working with Columbia and Cornell Weill. Next slide. Yeah, so we have the ingredients of having a great academic setting, commercial lab space, but really embracing this new innovation model, working with the community as well, is a really attractive location. Again, actually, we're pretty affordable at Harlem Biospace. I want to emphasize that as well. Next slide. And I think I'll just probably run through. You've seen the West Harlem, all the excitement. Next slide. And I think we'll hear more about this in the next talk as well. So I'll probably stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. It's so exciting that you had the foresight several years ago to start an incubator in this area, which would be an engine for new companies. You know, we have a series of leadership committees and people in the industry working on those. And one of the questions that comes up a lot is, where are the startups going when they graduate from the incubators? Do you track where they're going so that, you know, we can kind of follow them and kind of create a database of companies that are still in the city? Do we know if they're leaving the city, if they're staying in the city? What are they doing?
We can certainly share that with you. I mean, a fraction of our companies move on, you know, with what we're doing at HB. It's very affordable. We're sort of democratizing innovation. Not everyone makes it because we're, you know, we really have a really diverse crowd of companies working in different spaces at different levels. A lot of them are staying now because of the availability of real estate and obviously sources of funding as well. Some of them do leave. A couple of companies left during COVID just because they just, you know, couldn't justify living in Manhattan even on a personal cost basis. One of our companies very early on left to go to the Midwest. Dual Therapeutics, they were one of the biggest successes, but I think recently most of them have stayed on. We're also seeing companies that want to have a little outpost in New York City that are international companies. So we're also getting an influx. Overall, I think, you know, most of them are staying and it's definitely growing.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, that's very exciting. And I'm excited to hear about the graduation space that you're going to announce. It's sorely needed in the city. So now we want to turn to one of the academic engines and have Oren Herskowitz address what's going on at Columbia's Manhattanville campus.
Great, thanks so much, Nancy, and thanks for everything you do for the ecosystem here. It's really impressive. I love coming later in this talk because I'm incredibly proud to work along all of the folks who have gone so far. We're very close partners with Deerfield. We love the IndieBIO team. Janus has been a close friend of the university, and Scott has been a close friend of the university and has brought amazing companies into the neighborhood, including Velastra, who just had some big news announced recently with BMS. So just very, very exciting stuff. Sam obviously is a pioneer, not only for Harlem Biospace, but is a proud faculty member at Columbia and now vice provost of the university for many of these issues. So it's a really exciting group. And the folks coming next are equally important collaborators of ours. We love our peers at CUNY and the Structural Biology Center and many others. So I think what we want to talk about today a little bit is the ecosystem. And I'm going to stay, again, it's pretty short because we don't actually have, I've got no space to pitch right now. So it's really telling a story about what's going on in the ecosystem. First of all, and also put in a pitch for Dado Pizza, which is right down the block from Janus. And I had a slice there the other day. It was one of the best pizzas this lifelong New Yorker has ever had. So if you're in the neighborhood, check it out. It's right by the ABCD train. If you step back before the Manhattanville expansion from Columbia was apparently, back in the 1990s and early 2000s, was one of the most space-constrained universities in the world. And what that means is if you rank federal funding, which is the lifeblood of university research and the progenitor of all of the startups and licenses and industry collaborations that happen in a university, that the university had one of the highest rankings of federal funding per square foot of any university in the world, meaning what was really holding us back was more research labs. We just didn't have anywhere to put them. And so if we go to the next slide, so these are the top one and the bottom one are Columbia's historic Manhattan campuses. There was the Morningside Heights campus around 116th Street and the Medical Center campus up on 168th. And what happened was starting around 2005, and I think the first buildings went up around 2011, 2015, the Columbia Manhattanville campus opened up. And so the Manhattanville campus is what we're going to be focusing on today. But just to cite this first, these are the three of Columbia's Manhattanville campuses. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that actually the three campuses are not sitting in isolation. They're sitting along what we refer to as an innovation spine in West Harlem and Washington Heights. And you've got our three campuses, the Morningside campus, the Manhattanville campus, which we'll talk about more in a moment, and the Medical Center campus up at the north. But along the way, you've got West Harlem Factory District, you've got Harlem Biospace. On the left-hand side, you'll see the New York Structural Biology Center, CUNY's City College campus, and our incredible collaborators over at CUNY's new Advanced Science Research Center, which is open not only to Columbia faculty that come work there and faculty from all over the country, but many of our startups take advantage of these core facilities as well. And so it is a really, really rich ecosystem from a research perspective, crammed into a 2.5 mile span. And if you zoom out from there, next slide, please. What you'll see is that, as everyone knows, we're not in isolation here either. So we work incredibly closely with our peers all across the island of Manhattan, and in particular, Northern Brooklyn and Southern Bronx. There's an amazing array of academic research powerhouses in a very small amount of space that not only that happen to be here, but I've always said one of the things that really sets New York apart is that these institutions are deeply collaborative with each other, and not only collaborative from a research perspective, but also in terms of bringing in industry and venture capital and startups and trying to create these networks that can lead to an innovation ecosystem taking place. But it's not just New York City. If you zoom out, next slide, please. If you zoom out further, it's actually the whole region that is densely packed with these research institutions that are truly world-class. Like, I can't think of anywhere else in the world that has this density of research assets within a 2-hour drive. So with that in mind, that sets the stage for, so what are we talking about at the center of it all in the Manhattanville campus and the surroundings in West Harlem? So if we go to the next slide, I'll just explain what's gone up so far. So it's 17 acres total. It's about 1 million square feet currently developed, and another 7 or so that are pending, most of which have been allocated, but not all. And at this point, now that the new business school has opened there too, we have 6,000 people, faculty, students, staff, administrators, support people, people in the retail spaces, 6,000 interactions on the campus every day that were not there before the campus opened. So far, the buildings that you'll see, one of my favorite sites on campus is the Zuckerman Mind-Brain Behavior Institute in the Jerome L. Green Science Center. That's in the upper left. These are, by the way, it's a Renzo Piano design master plan. And so what you'll see is it is one of the world's largest facilities for the discussion of research into the neuroscience and human behavior. So the way our brains change who we are, how we perceive art and music and make decisions, behavioral economics, and the underlying neurochemistry and imaging. It is an amazing place and generating really interesting and potentially transformative scientific innovations that are leading the way towards startups and licenses, et cetera. We also now have the new Columbia Business School that's opened up. So the Henry Kravis building, oh God, I knew this would happen. It's gonna come back to me. Anyway, 2 buildings that have-
Perlman.
No, it's a musician, a music guy. It's gonna, anyway, it's gonna come back to me. I'm just blanking. But with a campus in the middle, so now the business school has moved there. And there's also a building called the Forum, which is a discussion center and collaboration space and conference center that's really meant to anchor Columbia's connection to the outside world. It's actually even designed to look like the prow of a ship sailing into the rest of the campus to sort of symbolize this new journey that Columbia is on. And so speaking of the new journey, I won't go to the next, let's stay on this slide, but I joined Columbia. I run the tech transfer office for Columbia and also do a bunch of stuff related to innovation. David Geffen, thank you so much, Sam. Anyway, I run a lot of things related to innovation, entrepreneurship, tech transfer, along with a bunch of my peers. When I joined Columbia in 2005, we had 5 research-based startups a year emerging from the university. Still very impressive, but 5 new startups a year. For the last few years, we have had between 25 and 30 research-based startups coming out of Columbia every year, including Schrödinger, Calliope, StableX, Rejuvitas, Progenics, Tara, Epibone, Xilinx, Vor, Applied Therapeutics. A bunch of these have been acquired or gone public just in the last few years. It has been an amazing explosion of startups emerging from the university, and also similar stories from our peers at CUNY and Rockefeller and Sloan Kettering and Cornell. So it has been a real transformative time in our innovation ecosystem. And I think what you see there is we need places to catch all this innovation. And what Scott is doing at Janus and Sam is doing at Harlem Biospace. And then next slide, you'll see we recently invited Alexandria Launch Labs to come into the Audubon Center. I saw that in the comment up at 168th Street to support the startups emerging from our medical center, because it's not all about the Morningside campus and Manhattanville campus. So that's a 14,000 square foot incubator. It opened during COVID. Within 8 months, it was full. Full with 8 startups and 35 employees and a very strong pipeline of future growth. So that's the sense of the ecosystem. There's a question earlier about Kendall Square, that this could be like a mini Kendall Square. I don't actually think this needs to be a mini anything. Is this going to be the Kendall Square of New York? I don't know. There's lots of innovation ecosystems around the country and around the world, and they're all fit to purpose. But I do think there's a story emerging in West Harlem, Washington Heights, that is unlike anywhere else I've seen. And with that, I'll hand it back to Nancy, unless if there's a question I see. But
yeah, it's just an amazing story, Oren. And, you know, as somebody who's worked alongside you for all this time, congratulations on everything that you've done at Columbia. I've got someone with their hand up. Loretta, do you want to say something? Do you want to unmute yourself?
No, I'm sorry. I just was touching a button that I shouldn't have touched.
All right, just checking
Thank you.
on you. Okay, thank you.
I do want to also just make the one point, which is you congratulated me. I had very little to do with this. It is 1,000 people working alongside each other to get this done.
Yeah, well, that was the same point that Eva made, right? It's taking the community to build this community in New York, as always. Okay, and now we're going to move over to CUNY and Joshua Brumberg, who's got some exciting scientific facilities to talk about.
Thank you, Nancy, for including me, and always good to follow Oren. So if I can have my first slide, please. So just like Oren, I have no space to sell, but to tell you about some exciting resources that we do have available to researchers from both academic, startup, and industrial users. That's the Advanced Science Research Center, which you can see the red dot on the left part of your slide, located on about 135th Street and Convent Avenue, so just above the Manhattanville campus of Columbia that Oren just described. It's a 200,000 square foot facility that opened in 2014. If I can have the next slide. There are 5 research areas within the building: neuroscience, nanoscience, structural biology, photonics, and environmental science. And it represented the culmination of a decade of investment in sciences at CUNY. And one of the things that we've done as an institution is we realized our researchers and researchers within the more general community needed high-end research facilities to conduct their research. And we've developed now 15 core facilities, with a few more to be coming online, that provide state-of-the-art instrumentation, and each one is run by an expert, a PhD researcher, to assist with researchers learning the equipment or running experiments for them, depending on what you do, for a for-fee service. I'm going to focus today on our offerings within biotechnology, because that's the focus of today's seminar. But do note, for example, we have New York City's largest clean room for nanofabrication, and just received an $8 million grant from New York State to create a biosensing sensor for advanced technology, where we've already working with 7 startup companies. And as Oren says, we have a lot of collaborations with Columbia and other universities within New York City. So thanks for Sam's comment in the chat. We're always welcome to show off our facilities. So if I can have the next slide, I'm just going to briefly walk folks through what we have in the bio facilities, but please know, as I said, we have a lot more. We have an NMR facility for those of you working with pharmaceutical companies that need to know about 3-dimensional structures of proteins, or how proteins bind to ligands. These are very much in collaboration with the New York Structural Biology Center. The next slide. Similarly, also, if you're developing different peptides, for instance, small targets for anti-cancer drugs, and you need to see how they react within different environments, the mass spectrometry facility. And I should say, as you see, for all of these, I provide a website. We list the specifics of the equipment as well as a price sheet. We're very transparent about the costs for each one of these services. Thank you. If you can move to the next slide. For those looking to discover the three-dimensional shape of things, we have a new crystallization facility, which just came online during COVID and is already beginning to get outside users. For some of these facilities, we've actually worked on ways in which you can send us the samples through the mail. We did this at the beginning of COVID, where we couldn't touch people, so you could send samples through the mail, and then we ran the stuff. And we also provide a conduit to Brookhaven National Labs, where we have a line on their light source for more high-end crystallization analysis. Next slide, please. We also have a whole suite of imaging technologies, both for live imaging and also for imaging of materials. We have a cryo transmission electronic microscopy, confocal imaging, two-photon imaging. And as I said, for every one of these facilities, we have full-time staff to help companies, to help startups, to help academics learn how to use these facilities properly and get the best out of them and get data that they can then use. Next slide, please. For those that are doing cognitive research, or we've also worked with marketing companies. A few years ago, one of the Super Bowl commercials was piloted here. So yes, they look at people's minds to see what they react to on Super Bowl commercials. So yes, we're programming our minds. So we have an MRI facility that includes not only a scanner, but a mock scanner. And we have ability also to make a variety of physiological measurements simultaneously with the imaging measurements, which is not something that's offered at many facilities. Next slide, please. One thing that's becoming increasingly important is the recognition that while we all may have similar genetic material, that is DNA or RNA, it is very much influenced by the environment in which we're in. And so there are ways to analyzing essentially the state that your DNA is in and how that makes you susceptible for different diseases. It's the study of epigenetics, and there's a way of analyzing this, and we have a full-time facility devoted to this. Next slide, please. So we're very proud of this. One of the founding ideas behind the Advanced Science Research Center is the next great scientific discovery is going to come up between collaboration between fields that are not necessarily linked. So structural biology and neuroscience, photonics and environmental science. And here's one such example that is a collaboration with our structural biologists and a neuroscientist, which created this imaging facility where we can now look at metabolites to see how in a variety of different diseases, your metabolism gets upset. Does it get upset globally? Does it get upset within specific areas of, in this case, the brain or in parts of the body? And so this was the first MALDI imaging facility to open up within the New York metropolitan area. The next slide, please. The other thing that for many of the buildings that we've heard of today, which have great facilities, they might not have animal facilities. And for a lot of bio-based industry, you need to be able to test out on mice. And we have a vivarium, 20,000 square foot, fully staffed. We've hosted many small pharmaceutical companies and has associated prep spaces. And we are happy to talk to you about renting those facilities, as well as a suite of behavioral tools where if you need to do assays, does the drug affect the animal's behavior, et cetera, all that is located in situ within our facility. Next slide, please. One of the things that happens of course, is, and hopefully more of this will be happening as we move back to quote unquote normal, is there is need for spaces in which we can congregate and actually do this in person or in a hybrid basis and not just on Zoom. We have a 100-seat custom auditorium and has streaming capabilities. We have poster boards. It's adjacent to both indoor and outdoor networking space. So if you're doing some sort of showcase or having some sort of conference or meeting, we have spaces that can be rented out along with, Wi-Fi, catering, et cetera, to provide you a basis for having these kind of networking interactions. Next slide. And finally, I would like to, invite all of you. We're having, as I said, our biosensor cat launch event is April 17th. And, to highlight one of the things, Oren talked about innovation, City University of New York, we're actually older than you might think. We date our history back to 1847. We are the third largest university system in America with just under 300,000 enrolled students from undergraduate to doctoral to continuing ed students spread out across 25 campuses. So we were really kind of an engine of ingenuity within New York City and specifically with the ASRC within the Manhattanville campus. So I thank Nancy very much for including us in today's discussions.
Yeah, no, thank you, Josh, for coming and talking about these important facilities, because many startups don't have the resources to be able to purchase this kind of equipment, and they don't have the expertise to run it either. And so having that readily available in the neighborhood is a really, really important resource.
Absolutely. And we're happy to have visitors to come by and see what we have to offer.
Yeah, well, we hope to bring them up to you pretty soon. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today, for speaking and for spending your time sharing your stories with us. You see on the screen, episode 4 will be focusing on Hudson Square and Jersey City. That will take place on April 26th from noon to 1:30. You can register now using the Q code that's on your screen, or you can go onto our website and register that way. We've got just 4 minutes left. We can drop into discussion groups just for the next 5 minutes and say hello if you like. But thank you, everyone, for coming to join us today, and to all of our speakers for sharing this information with us.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Mm.